This is Ducati's first serious adventure bike, and by that I don't mean that the Multistradas aren't serious bikes or anything. It's just that they generally lean heavily towards being road biased tourers that can do some off-roading. That means the DesertX is essentially Ducati's no-compromise 21-inch front wheel bundu bashing specialist, a big adventure bike that will go anywhere you want to take it off-road. At least anywhere that any of the other ostensibly more hardcore off-road brands would take you anyway. And in a way, this serious off-roader where function, the ability to walk the adventure walk if you like, is so important, was actually born out of an exercise in styling. The concept Ducati DesertX appeared at EICMA back in 2019 and it was received exceptionally well. Everybody, including us, loved it and told Ducati, please build it. The show concept was essentially a dressed up Scrambler 1100 with the air-cooled engine, and if you look closely it probably wasn't really all that hardcore in terms of its off-road potential. Well, Ducati listened to its fans and opted to build it, but decided to use the opportunity to make a serious adventure bike. This DesertX is the result, and though the air-cooled engine and Scrambler influences have obviously been dumped in favour of more modern technology, I'm very glad to see that the twin headlight look seems to have made the transition from concept to production relatively unscathed. Yes, there is undoubtedly a retro element to the aesthetic, as there is to so many things that are regarded as cool these days. And yes, it probably resonates with riders of a similar age to myself who can remember the big dual headlight trailies of the 80s and 90s. But I don't think you need to be in your 40s or 50s for this to strike you as a handsome machine. It just is. Its proportions are right from just about every angle. It manages a fine balance between rugged and beautiful, purposeful and pretty. It may be Ducati's most serious adventure bike where function is all important, but Ducati is Italian after all, and Italian engineers very rarely make any kind of machine that isn't good looking. Bridges, cars, coffee machines, lampshades, sofas, it doesn't matter what it's meant to do. It generally does it while looking very cool indeed. And the DesertX is no exception. And what about the ingredients for this adventure bike? Well, once they ditched the idea of the underpowered air-cooled engine, Ducati didn't have to look too far for a suitable unit. The 937cc Testa Stretta motor that powers the monster Multistrada V2, Supersport and Hypermotard has proved itself to be reliable. It can churn out anything up to about 115 horsepower without any worries, and it's not too complicated or expensive. In this guise, it has 110 horsepower and 92 newton meters, and thanks to a shortening of the gearing, particularly in terms of first and second gears, this V-twin never feels anything other than plenty rapid enough.
In the roads I've encountered here, in the foothills of the Apennines, I really can't see the need for any more power. I don't think we'd be able to use it. I'm confident that an experienced rider on these sorts of roads would easily be able to hang with a similarly experienced rider on a superbike, no problem at all. These roads can be incredibly demanding though, and not just because they keep throwing endless hairpins and blind crests at you, but because of the conditions of the road, and also, and that's not, just in terms of the road surface itself, which can often be crumbling and potholed, but in this part of the world there's a lot of subsidence, a lot of dips and bumps, and they can really throw you off your stride. Well, they can if you're not on an adventure bike with long travel suspension that's really well controlled. I'd hate to be riding with anything with sport suspension on it, road suspension, even a naked bike. It'll just be bloody difficult along here. And of course, with it being winter, there's lots of lovely little damp spots as well, just in case you weren't hyper aware of what was going on anyway.
And I have to say that the long travel suspension that is obviously required to allow the bike to perform in demanding off-road situations actually controls this big bike on the tar remarkably well. 230mm at the front, 220mm at the rear is a lot of potential movement that can help you deal with everything from boulders and ruts to landing some jumps, and in theory it should be utterly horrible for road riding.
And yet, yeah, of course, if you grab a handful of brake, then you are going to get a fair amount of dive at the front end. But you can still brake firmly, meaningfully, but just be less vicious, and it's entirely manageable.
And although I have read some reviews that suggest a ride on the road you need to get your tools out and dial in some suspension adjustments, fully adjustable suspension by the way, make it firmer in other words, I have to say I'm not convinced. I think it's pretty remarkable how taut it is on the standard settings and how much useful feedback you still get about what's happening with your grip levels. Admittedly, the roads I'm riding don't really allow much in the way of super high speeds, so maybe that plays a part, but I'm still doing quite a bit of point and squirt riding, dealing with hairpins, riding through dips and bumps that would have me quaking with fear on any kind of sporting road bike.
Nah, I'm really impressed with the bike's road manners. I mean, for something that's been designed very much with its off-road capabilities front and centre, how it deals with road environments like this, it far surpasses my expectations, I have to be honest with you. And it's not just that it copes with this, it gives you enough of a poised, can I say poised? Yeah, poised package for an off-road bike.
Well, I say it's a big adventure bike, but in the strange new world of motorcycle development, a nearly 1 litre V-twin adventure bike with a pretty lengthy wheelbase of 1608mm, a lofty seat height of 875mm, and a curb weight of 223 kilos is, it seems, a middleweight model these days. Climbing on, moving it around at standstill even, pottering around some off-road trails as an inexperienced adventure rider, alone, far from immediate help. It does not feel very middleweight, let me tell you. But then in a world of 1.3 litre, 150 horsepower and more adventure bikes, I suppose it is theoretically not big, but still feels pretty bloody large to me. Middleweight for me would be the Tenere 700 or Aprilia's Touareg, but truth be told, although they are usefully a touch lighter and a bit more agile, they've also got similarly tall seat height, so I think I just have to accept that the world has moved on in the last decade, and what was previously an undoubted big adventure bike, KTM's 950 for instance, would now be regarded as a middleweight. Anyway, middleweight or monster of an adventure bike, even one focused on off-road riding, ideally needs to be comfortable for long distances on the road, because for most of us not blessed with deserts or mountains on our doorstep, there is usually a pretty long haul to get where the off-road adventuring can really begin. And although at first glance it might look a bit Spartan and unwelcoming, the DesertX defies expectations once again and proves well up to the task of churning out the miles on a long run. The seat initially seems like it might be a bit of a plank, but it has looked after me for several 2 to 3 hour stints without any major complaints, I have to say. I think it helps that it's so easy to shift around front to back. There's quite a lot of room, so you can vary your position enough to spread the load, so to speak. And then there's this smallish screen, and it too actually provides a good level of protection, easily enough for you to sit for long periods at the highway speed limit anyway. Obviously this sort of thing is very, very personal and depends on how tall you are and how you sit on the bike, but it's also one of the easiest elements to remedy with an aftermarket screen. As for its abilities off-road, I'll be honest and say if you want a really in-depth reporting on that score, then you need to check out some other reviews from the more skilled adventure riders among the journalists of the world, but I'll happily give you my impressions as a relative off-road novice. A boulder and gravel-strewn riverbed are not exactly an easy, ideal riding environment for someone of my skill level, so, oh, nice, massive. So I need this bike that's designed for experts to conquer outrageously difficult terrain. I need it to be able to just cosset me, look after me, gentle throttle responses, stability, eliminate head shake, all that good stuff to make the coward in me relax a little bit, which I have to say it is. If I'm not careful, I'm going to start enjoying myself. This really is one of the best adventure bikes I've had, despite its size, for just being easy to point it and put it exactly where you want it. I'm not into the mixture here though of sudden damp patches of mud followed by big boulders followed by mud, but still, could be worse, could be sand. Of the 6 riding modes, 2 are dedicated to off-road riding, with enduro and rally catering effectively to differing levels of dirt riding ability. Enduro, which made me feel most comfortable, cuts the power to 75 horsepower and has increased levels of intervention from ABS and traction control compared to the rally mode that also unleashes the full 110 horsepower. Traction control can be removed entirely, as can ABS, which goes from a road setting through a setting for the dirt that allows more movement to an option that removes the ABS completely from the rear. I have conferred with genuinely handy off-road riding colleagues and they rate it, they really do. They say it's properly capable when you get the speeds up and start getting some air and generally riding like you're trying to win the Baja, but I think that makes me realise that Ducati, it seems, have built a bike that caters to both ends of the riding spectrum, so you'd have to say it's a pretty well suspended, perfectly fueled package that can look after you if you're Danilo Petrucci type of level, or if you're Matt Duran's barely surviving level. Yeah, I am in genuine danger of actually relaxing a bit and enjoying myself, which I really wasn't anticipating. Although I have to say some of the bigger boulders difficult to see in this flat light, and they'll have me off, no doubt about it. But otherwise, the DesertX, okay, the River X at the minute, is definitely taking me places to explore that otherwise I would not see. And that, of course, is the beauty of the adventure bike, the two-wheeled equivalent of hiking off the beaten path. You get to experience areas that your average road rider would simply never see. In case you were wondering how I ended up in a riverbed, it was because the other trails up and down the mountains in that area were simply too much like hard, dangerous work for someone with my fairly rudimentary off-road riding skills. I was in that region for a couple of weeks all told, most of which time it was raining, and when I was walking my dog along some of the trails in the hills, I just kept getting caked in this thick, sticky, almost clay-like mud that made it difficult to stand up, never mind ride a big adventure bike. So given the drought of this previous summer, the riverbed actually ended up being the driest, least horrible option. Quite bouldery at times and patches of mud, but nothing that thankfully actually had me off, though I did have a few ungainly out of the seat moments when I hit some of the bigger boulders when I was out scouting some of the filming locations. Thankfully, being Ducati's serious off-roader, it has a 21-inch front wheel for maximum obstacle crushing ability, but I do want to tangent a bit here and quickly mention that despite that ultimate off-road size, it still manages to feel every bit as planted on the road as a 19-inch rim, which is no mean feat. Anyway, the bike, as you can tell, I really enjoyed it. It is obviously Ducati's most off-road focused adventure bike, and it is very good at that discipline, but I just want to reiterate that it was also a genuinely entertaining and capable road bike on those tight Apennine passes. And so I would say that, and this is undoubtedly going to annoy all those hardcore off-road adventure purists, but I think it would make a great road bike, actually a great city bike for those of you living in a vast metropolis somewhere who want a tool for devouring everything the urban landscape can throw at you. Even if you never take it off-road, I think it would be brilliant for that sort of thing. Tight turning circle, elevated riding position, top brakes, long travel suspension for dodgy, broken inner city roads and jumping curbs and the like, and an engine with about the perfect level of power for the city as well. And not forgetting that there is that very important element for the young man or woman about town. It looks the absolute business. If a Land Rover, Range Rover, Land Cruiser X5 Q7 thingamy 4x4 can live its life far from any muddy mountain trails, I don't see why a DesertX can't do exactly the same thing. I really would buy one for that kind of lifestyle. You'll not find a better two-wheeled weapon for the mean city streets than this Ducati. Certainly nothing that looks quite as good as this, that's for sure. Okay, to wrap up, it's easily Ducati's most capable adventure bike to date, and I reckon it puts the Italian manufacturer right up there with the best of all the adventure competition. I didn't mention the monster range of accessories that are available, but let me quickly point out the very cool and extremely useful extra fuel tank that mounts on the rear of the bike and can, when there's enough room available in the already sizable 21-litre main tank, dump its 8 litres in there to give you a proper dose of extra range. Where was I? Yes, it's a great bike, but being a Ducati, you know I'm going to say this, I suppose, it's expensive. Just north of 17,000 euros in standard trim, so probably about 270,000 rand or so in South Africa. And you will drop it because that's what adventure biking is all about. And then there's Ducati's spares prices to consider. It's not outrageously expensive, but since we're classing it as a middleweight, there are other alternatives from the major players that are that bit more affordable. But it's a Ducati. They're always at the top end of the scale price-wise. That's part of what makes them Ducati. It's certainly not stopping them in terms of sales and profitability this past few years as they continue to go from strength to strength despite the attentions of a certain pandemic. The DesertX is a bike, even as a relative novice adventure rider, that I would happily put in my own garage. And I don't think I can say much more than that, really.